Hello students, welcome to this video on CVP. I have a question here that I want us to run through. Quite interesting. Again, there's two companies and you have to do a comparison. All the information is not available. You need to play around with mathematics and do certain calculations. This is question 3 and I want us to read together. It says that Benchmark Limited is a company that requires your assistance in performing a comparison between the entity and its nearest competitor called FlyHigh Limited. The following information was provided. So you will find in the first column it's Benchmark, in the second column it is FlyHigh. Then they have listed there the actual sales units. It's not been provided for FlyHigh. For Benchmark it's 2,000. Then fixed cost has not been provided for Benchmark, but it's been provided for FlyHigh. Then there's variable cost per unit. It's been given for FlyHigh, but not for Benchmark. Then there's sales price per unit, not given, but given for FlyHigh. And then the contribution in rand is given, but FlyHigh is a question is replaced by a question mark. You have a contribution margin for Benchmark Limited, a question mark for FlyHigh. Then there's break even in rand only listed for Benchmark, and margin of safety ratio only listed for FlyHigh. Then in the required part in 3.1, they ask you to calculate the fixed cost of Benchmark. Then in 3.2, and they ask you what is Benchmark's margin of safety. In 3.3, they ask you to calculate how many units FlyHigh should produce and sell to break even. In 3.4, you need to calculate the actual units, sales units. In 3.5, you need to calculate the net profit before tax that was generated by Benchmark. And in 3.6, they ask you, suppose that there's an after-tax profit of 5544,000 and the tax rate is 28%. How many units were sold? Right, so this is quite interesting. I'm going to open an Excel spreadsheet. And then we can start with this example. Whenever this computer is ready, as you can tell, I am not at all frustrated with technology. Right, I'm just increasing the size so that you can also see. And we are on 3.1. So in 3.1, we need to do a calculation. I'm just quickly taking you back to the question. 3.1, we need to calculate our fixed cost. So you will find that the fixed cost has not been given. So I need to go and see what information has been given that is related to the fixed cost. So if I look at my contribution, it is not necessarily related to the fixed cost because contribution is normally your selling price minus all your variable costs. Then contribution margin, also not really related, but break even in rand would definitely be related. And then with the contribution margin, we can go, or the contribution margin percentage, we can go and calculate our fixed cost. Because if we look at the formula, they say that break even in rand terms is your fixed cost, and it needs to be divided by the contribution margin percentage, and we have all the information because we know in terms of rand that we've been given an amount of 2.4 million. So 2.4 million should be equal to the fixed cost, which we are uncertain of, divided by the contribution margin, which was given. And I use the contribution margin in the formula always as a decimal. So that would be 0.8333, I think. And now we can solve this mathematically through a cross multiplication. So you will find that we can take the 2.4 million and we can times it by the contribution margin decimal, and that should be equal to the fixed cost times 1. And if I do that multiplication, I get the fixed costs to be 1,999,920. So that's quite easy. And also, again, an exam tip that I said in class and that I would like to repeat is that if you have calculated a figure, go and fill it out in the question paper as well. So I'm going to go back to the fixed cost here. I'm just going to use another color, and then I'm going to say this should actually not be a question mark anymore. I solved it. It's 1,999,920. So if I later on need to do any calculations that require the fixed cost, I don't have to go back to my own calculations. I've written it or I've made a note for myself, and you can save yourself a lot of time in this instance. All right, in 3.2, they say they want to know for benchmark, what is the margin of safety ratio? So margin of safety means that we want to measure by how many units we are safe. So if margin of safety can be demonstrated or is demonstrated, I would say, let's suppose that this line is my actual sales. We are on 3.2. And if I have break even, let's take another type and draw, let's say, no, that will not work. Are there not any double line? No, also no. Anything else? Color line. Let's make it a red. Okay, so let's say that this is our break even represented by the red. Then I know that this gap in between is my safe units. So this represents break even. I always just call it BE, break even. This is my actual. So margin of safety measures, if you wish, that gap in between. So these are your safe units. And if we want to calculate the margin of safety, we take the safe units. So the margin of safety is your safe units, and we divide it by the sales units. So if I look at this question, the actual units have been given to us, and they tell us in the question that that is 2,000 units. What we do not have is the break-even unit. So we need to go and do a calculation first for break-even. So I'm going to skip a few lines because I need to fill out my margin of safety, but I first need my break-even units. So for break-even in units, we take the fixed cost and we divide it by the contribution in rand. And here, this now should not be a problem for you because you filled out that your fixed costs were 1,999,920 and the contribution was given. The contribution is 1,250. So I'm going to divide by 1,250. And if I do that calculation, I get 1,600 units as break-even units. So there we go, 1,600 units. So you'll agree with me, this safe units or this gap in between should represent then 400 units because the difference between 2,000 and 1,600 is 400 units. So to fill out the margin of safety, I'm going to say there's 400 safe units. The actual sales was 2,000, and because you're calculating a ratio, we want to divert it to percentage, so we times by 100. 400 divided by 2,000 times 100 should give you 20%. So margin of safety 20%, and I go back and I fill it out. So there again, I'm just going to write it in red. Margin of safety is 20%. Right, the next question, we are on 3.3. They ask us how many units does FlyHigh need to produce in order to break even. So now we need to go and look at the information given, and at this point, this required part should be a breeze because they have given you the fixed cost, the sales, and the variable cost, and so therefore you will be able to calculate the contribution. And the contribution in this question should be 1,000. Just again put it in red, 1,300 because it's the sales price minus the variable cost. So in calculating in 3.3, the break even, I'm simply going to use that formula again to say the break even, and they're asking us units. So the break even in units is your fixed cost divided by the contribution in rand terms, and there we will say that the fixed cost was given as 2.5 million, and we have, come on, 2.5 million. We need to divide by 1,300 contribution. And if I do that calculation, I get to an answer of 1,923 units. That was pretty straightforward. In 3.4, they ask us, what is the actual sales units for FlyHigh? If I look at the information given that relate to FlyHigh, the only possible information that can relate to actual units is the margin of safety, because the margin of safety is our safe units divided by the actual units times 100. So this is definitely the formula that I will have to use to solve this calculation. So margin of safety, again, is your safe units divided by your actual units, and we times it by 100. So in this instance, you've been given the margin of safety, and that was given to you as 23.08%. And we do not know the sales units, so I'm just going to call it, let's call it sales. So I'm going to say it is the sales units minus our break-even units, because I'm typing now a formula for getting to my safe units, which is sales units minus break-even units divided by sales units times 100. But you will agree with me that I just calculated the break-even units. So I know that for the break-even, I can go and say it's minus 1923 units divided by the sales units gives me 100. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to get rid of the 100. So I'm going to divide by 100 on both sides. And if I do that, I get 0,2308 should give you the sales minus, or the sales units, minus 1923. I just put this in brackets because I first need to calculate that, divided by the sales. Now I can cross multiply. So when I cross multiply, I am going to say that 0,2308 times the sales units should equal sales units minus 1,923 units. And now this is quite easy to solve, because I will say basically this is 1 times the sales. So if you should, for example, replace this by, let's say, X, you basically have 0,23x is 1x minus 1,923. So the mathematical rule is that we should get all the variables that are not familiar to one side, and we should change the sign. So here I'm going to say is 0,2308 minus x minus 1x should give us minus 1923. If I do that calculation, I get to minus 0,7692x, which is equal to minus 1923. And if I now, oh, this thing is a bit confused. Oh, let me just do this. There we go. And if I now solve x, I'm going to say x by dividing, of course, both sides by 0,769 or minus 0,769 rather, I get x to be 2,500 units. So therefore, the actual sales units should be 2,500 units. Very interesting. I'm going back to my question to fill out what I've calculated. Just putting it in red. It was 2,500 units. Righto, next. They said 3.5, calculate the net profit generated by benchmark. Right, so this should not be too difficult because we have been given the sales unit as well as the contribution. So if I want to calculate my net profit in 3.5, I'm going to start by saying I need to calculate the contribution. From that, I need to minus my fixed cost. So in calculating the contribution, I'm just quickly going back, it's 1,250 per unit at 2,000 units. So 1,250 Rand, and I'm going to times that by 2,000 units. That gives me a total contribution of 2.5 million. And then I'm going to minus my fixed cost, which I've calculated to be 1,999,920. So my net profit for the year is then the difference. And if I get a final answer, my final answer is 500,080 Rand. Great. We are on the last required part. Very interesting. The last required part relates to a question that involves tax. It tells you that FlyHigh had made a profit after tax of 554,400. So please note this very important piece of information there. After tax, because we do have a predetermined profit formula where we say we take the fixed cost plus the profit divided by the contribution of 1 unit. But the profit that we add in that formula should be before tax. So we have a problem here with the fact that this amount is after tax. They give you the tax rate and they ask how many units were sold to generate this profit. Right, so let's see if we can solve this. I'm going to start with the profit after tax. So the profit after tax in Rand terms is given to us as the amount of 554,000. And in terms of percentage, ladies and gents, a profit after tax, or the profit after tax in this instance, will be 100 minus 30. So 100 minus 30 leaves us with 70%. The tax is therefore, the income tax is therefore represented by 30%, which means that the profit before tax is represented by 100%. So the profit before tax minus the 30% tax gives you the profit after tax. So before I can go and fill out my formula, I must first determine what is my profit in Rand terms before tax. So this is quite simple because I will mainly work with the percentages, and I know that this is very infantile, but I always say I like to use the formula. You divide by the percentage that you have and you times by the percentage that you want. In this instance, we have been given 70%, but I beg your pardon, this was given as 28. Let me just correct myself there. The percentage, it was 28, which means we are rather left with 72, which means the tax was rather 28. So if you were to be given 30%, 70% would be left, 28%, 72% is left. So for the profit after tax, it's represented by the percentage of 72%, where profit before tax is always 100%, and I'm trying to calculate 100%. So I will take the amount that I've been given, the 554,000. I divide by the percentage that it represents, 72. I times by the percentage that I want to calculate, which is 100. So if I perform this calculation, I say divide by 72 times 100, I get 7, so that should be what, 7.7 million. So the profit before tax that we're going to use in our predetermined profit calculation is the profit before tax, which is 7.7 million, and not the profit after tax that's been given. So you need to do, if you are given a profit after tax, you need to do an additional support calculation before you can start with the formula. Right, so here I'm going to say the predetermined profit formula says we need to take the fixed cost and we need to add our profit, and then we need to divide that by the contribution of a unit. And in doing that, I'm going to say our predetermined profit is then calculated by taking our fixed cost. In this question for FlyHigh, it was 2.5 million. I'm going to add the 7.7 million that we've just calculated, and then I need to go and divide by the contribution of a unit, and we have established that that is 1,300. If I do this calculation, let me just scroll down a little bit. If we do this calculation, I get to an answer of 7,846 units. So in order for us to generate an after-tax profit of 5,544,000, if the tax rate is 28%, we need to sell 7,846 units. Right, I thought that this was quite an interesting question, especially at this part where you have to play around with the margin of safety. It's really quite interesting, the mathematics, but luckily you guys are very good at mathematics. So I wanted to share this just to make sure that you do have an additional example. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and if you should have any more questions, please stop by my office so that I can help you during consultation. Until then, have a wonderful day.